it's an exciting time because if that's a lie, that's going to be falsified very quickly. It's a bold fucking lie.
For real.
And so after all my interactions with him, I do tend to trust him, but I think you have to think probabilistically with all of this stuff. And anybody who definitively tells you a thing is true without having seen the thing is full of shit. So I always want to kind of make that clear with all of this stuff I'm doing. I think the duty of science is to speculate. That's where stuff, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, I'm not going to debate a guy who's, sitting on classified information. Well, there's a ton of open source information. And the second we have definitive proof of aliens, then it's not a debate. Then you're just this person who's sitting back waiting for everybody, for the consensus to shift first. You should be on the forefront.
Have you ever wondered if your company is maximizing the return of your data investment? Are you collecting the right data required to make informed decisions? Is there more that can be learned from our data? Koyas Institute can answer these questions and help you discover the hidden value within your datasets by utilizing a well-rounded approach to data analysis. Stop leaving value behind and start increasing the return on your data investment. The next generation of data analysis has begun. We are pioneers in pattern discovery. We are Koyas Institute.
Sort of enough, or is that
natural light's looking good? You're looking better than my my little ghetto setup, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, bro.
No, I love it, man. It's cool to see it live because I'm a fan, and I like the little guitar back there.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it, man. You play anything?
I used to play trumpet and piano, actually. Nice. And then I made hip hop beats. Actually made
cool.
the song for my show.
Nice. I actually love your intro beat. It kind of gives me that MF Doom vibe.
For sure. Wow. You like MF Doom?
Oh no, dude. Don't let the buttoned up shirt right now fool you. I'm a massive hip hop head. I just keep it relatively clean on the channel, but no, I'm a massive fan of hip hop. I mean, I'm a big music guy, multi-genre, whatever it really is. Like, there's always something nice in every single flavor, but hip hop for me has always been like a big one, you know?
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. I am too. That's probably my favorite genre.
Yeah, nice. I actually dropped a track because I write lyrics as well. I've been writing lyrics since I was like 11. Basically since my parents, unbeknownst to them how explicit it was, gave me one of the first Eminem albums, you know, and like when I was a kid I had one of that, so that was like the first introduction to it, and then from there I went into like loving a lot of different types of hip hop. But yeah, since then I started writing, and then funnily enough, one of my Patreons, he's actually a producer out in New York. So when I was out in New York, he was like, oh, dude, come hang out. We'll just maybe put something together. And we ended up doing something. It was pretty good, actually. I put it out on Twitter and people liked it.
I gotta check that out. So
yeah, I'll send it to you.
Hip hop or rock or what genre?
Yeah, it was hip hop. It was hip hop.
No way.
I did a couple of verses. He did a verse and a great hook.
Struggling to wrap your brain around it in this instant. I can tell you're struggling, I'll provide assistance. You're made of energy, it's representing all there is within the infinite kaleidoscope reality consists of. Mate, I've got hereditary traits within the mystics. I'm just resonating, manifesting through existence.
It's liminality. Can't tell what's fake in this reality.
For it as well, actually, he's really good because he does shows and stuff. He's a genuine producer and hip hop guy, so he's great. But yeah, it was cool, man. I'll send it to you if you want to check it out.
Please, I would love to check it out. Maybe we have to collab one of these days. Make like a
you know what, man? That'd be cool. I'd like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I've been get back into it forever, and every year I'm like, I'm gonna get back into it, and then I don't. So
yeah, if all else fails, maybe I don't know. I'll try like a hip hop career or something. We'll see how it goes. See how it goes.
There you go.
So how you doing anyway, man? How's your day been?
I'm good. It's been insanely busy. I woke up really, really early, and I've been just working. But it's been good. What about you?
Yeah, not bad actually. Was kind of I'm one of those people that, especially when it comes to interviews, like I end up doing most of the work, the actual either the day prior or on the day, because that's when I'm the most productive. I'm one of those weird people who's the most productive right when it's kind of like the time to do it. So I've been working on the like kind of like a couple of notes here and there, and I got some Patreon questions that I want to run through with you as well, which I think you'll like. Some really good Patreon questions. And then I did a bit of rock climbing because I'm a big rock climber. So I went down to there's a local climbing center, like an indoor climbing center. So, yeah. I kind of get the vibe. I don't know if you've ever done it, but I just feel like if you haven't done it, you'd enjoy it if you've never done it.
Okay. I've done like the indoor, PG version, but I've never done like a real. Right.
Yeah, I mean,
climb Half Dome once, and I was like, it was like an overnight hike, and I was like delirious from the night before, and I remember just like zoning out while I was like tying the rope, and I was like, I should probably get down. And
yeah, you don't. I mean, delirium plus climbing on Half Dome aren't really things that you should be combining together, to be honest, bro. But I'm jealous because like Yosemite is somewhere I just need to make a pilgrimage to at some point. I love that national park. I've only seen it through documentaries, but yeah, to kind of climb around there and just hike around there. It's such a beautiful area of California.
Super beautiful.
Yeah.
Really nice. Yeah.
Are you born and bred, Cali?
I am. I'm from LA originally. So, and then moved back here like 5 years ago.
Nice.
San Francisco, New York in between. Where are you? And you're in London or?
No, I'm in Nottingham. Do you know Nottingham? Or Americans call it Nottingham.
Yeah. I was about to do that. I think I just did do that.
Yeah. So yeah, but I've
like I've heard of it, but where is not?
Have you heard of Robin Hood? Have you heard
what's that?
Have you heard of Robin Hood? Like the character Robin Hood. Yeah, right. So that's like he originates from Nottingham. He's from Sherwood Forest. Like the whole kind of mythical character of Robin Hood was a bandit out in Sherwood Forest, which is literally just down past where I live. So yeah, Nottingham's kind of like in the middle of England. It's in like the north, like kind of in the northern part of England, but kind of in the middle of almost in the middle of the island. Yeah, I've lived here for like 5 years. I lived in London before then for like a number of years. Did like university in London, but then before then I was living out in North Wales, out in the countryside.
Got it.
Yeah. So I've had the kind of like split between city and country lifestyle, both of them. I like both. I need a little bit of both in my life. I can't just be in the city or in the country. I got to have kind of like a split.
Yeah. I feel that. I'm having the same thoughts right now. Even at LA, which is sort of a poor excuse of a city. It's like a really bunch of suburbs kind of mashed together or whatever. I still feel like, some decompression in I don't know, some foresty or, place with a lake or something. I don't know. I mean, LA is kind of a beach town, but it's just, there's a lot of BS too.
It's an interesting place, man. I mean, I've only been once. I literally came once for a conference, and was there for a few days and just kind of explored the typical part, like, like the Hollywood area.
Yeah.
Interesting city. But, you need a little bit of balance in your life. You need a little bit of balance sometimes. It can be a bit suffocating when you're in one area, especially a city,
Totally. Yeah. 100%, man. Well, I'm a huge fan of your show. I have questions for you too. So
yeah, well, I'm happy for there to be a back and forth, man. Like my favorite kind of discussions are ones where it's a bit dynamic and organic. But I mean, I do want to know a little bit about you and your background. You've got a great YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much for the compliments. You don't upload that regularly, but when you do, it's high quality. It's engaging. Hey, look, I mean, you put a lot of effort into it when you put it out. So, quality over quantity, to be honest, I think is a good way of looking at your channel. But you get great guests, man. And it shows you're pretty well connected. You're friends with Eric Weinstein. You're friends with the guys from Yes Theory. And you released this really, really well-produced documentary with them, which we're going to have to get into as well.
Thank you, man. Well, I'm excited to get into it all, and I really appreciate it. I professionally eschew every convention of like launching a podcast or show with my release cadence and schedule. I like break every rule of thumb. So that's nice of you to say, because the one
yeah, well, you know what, buddy, you still got 2 million views on that bad boy, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. And congratulations, by the way, on getting 2 million. That's nothing to shrug off.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I can say that with a straight face. Is I go pretty hard on the research and I tried to make the product good. So
yeah, well, I mean, no, dude, honestly, it was good. It was well rounded. I mean, it gave us a nice insight into David Grush. Also, just for those who don't know and haven't, kind of been following all of this, David Grush is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and National Reconnaissance Office senior intelligence official. He testified recently under oath to Congress about essentially the existence of classified black budget programs that have non-human technology and vehicles in their possession. So, this is a serious guy, GS-15 rank, and turns out you've been buddies with him in the background. So you did this documentary. It's done very well, hit like 2 million. It's, like I said, nice and well-rounded, and it gives us a different perspective of David Grush. So how do you kind of feel about the reception from the whole thing?
I feel both super overwhelmed and underwhelmed. So that
okay,
where I feel very, and you might identify with this, where I feel very overwhelmed is like just how many people have seen it. Like right. I'm actually mostly a pretty private person, and I sort of got into this because I felt like it's almost like a vigilante job of like the reporting on it's just so fucking bad, and so like I have to like step in and like say some stuff about this topic that I think is really about the nature of reality and deeper concepts than just specific metal objects that we're seeing in the sky. And so I feel like sort of overwhelmed in how many people have seen it. And I've been recognized a couple of times, which is like totally not, I'm not used to that. I'm used to being, much more behind the scenes. So that's really cool and awesome, and just having people appreciate it and all the comments and stuff. And then some really hardcore UFO people like Jacques Vallée hit me up and was like, this was amazing. And I talked to Hal Puthoff, and he was like, that was incredible. Like, he pieced together all this stuff. I talked to Grush afterwards, and he was like, dude, like you've like weaved together, you figured out more than like maybe anybody I've ever met without a security clearance. So like hearing stuff like that is like beyond gratifying. And then where I feel super underwhelmed and kind of disappointed is like, a part of me is like, why am I in this position? Like I'm a tech investor from LA who I've got into this thing 4 or 5 years ago, but like really more hardcore into the UFO thing maybe 2-3 years ago, to be honest. And like, I shouldn't be the tip of the spear as far as knowledge. Like, I shouldn't be getting that comment. And like, maybe I'm way off base, by the way. I don't want to say I'm like right about a lot of these things I've sort of feel like I've threaded together, but it's like you put the thing out and the response is, it's like anechoic. Like there's nothing in return, and everybody just goes about their day. And, I want to like kind of bash the mainstream media like Ross did on your show after his interview, where it's like, they're completely out to lunch. But even the alternative media, even like the kind of usual suspects that you'd expect to sort of cover this stuff and like claim they're into UFOs, are like, they're into it like through like an entertainment lens. It's like, I think like Crystal and Cigar had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, and the only thing they could bring up was like, Grush wants to debate you, like do it on our show or whatever. And it's like, guys, like I'm saying that atomic secrecy, I'm not saying, Dave is saying that atomic secrecy is overlaying UFO secrecy. Oppenheimer was involved probably in the cover-up. Condon, the tight with Oppenheimer, is the main detract. Like, there's just a Sarbacher who's like a very mysterious name.
Well, this is the thing, though. I mean,
nobody fucking knows anything. That's why I like your show, and I'm happy to do this because you go deeper, which is cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, you're dealing with layers with it, right? I mean, there is like a pretty small group of researchers who have been doing a hell of a lot of work for decades and do know about things like the connection to the Manhattan Project and Oppenheimer and all of these types of characters and the Atomic Energy Commission. But this is not public knowledge in terms of surface knowledge. Like, this is not stuff that people just generally know. It's like really obscure, fringe information that people have been laughed at for saying, like, oh, well, did you know that the shut up, man. Like, no one wants to hear this stuff. And so, like, now it's starting to come to the forefront. Now it's getting popular, which I think had a massive benefit for getting you the view rates that you got, because people are becoming a lot more interested in this, people that weren't interested before. So there is like a momentum and there is a shift, and it's come from a lot of these people and players and movements over the last few years, basically since 2017. But how did you get into the whole situation with David Grush? Like, kind of lead us through the storyline to you getting connected there.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to touch on one thing you said. Also,
yeah, go ahead.
I hope you're right. I hope this snowballs, and I hope I don't want to be the tip of the spear. I want somebody else to take up the torch and like far exceed me or falsify any of the things we've said. That would be awesome. If somebody could come in, I just want a response. If somebody could come in and say, no, this is definitively BS for XYZ reasons, or even the things that I said were explicitly speculative, like the JFK letter or whatever. It's like crazy to me that we have a letter in 2006 that was FOIA'd, JFK to the CIA, asking for information on unknowns or UFOs, and like nobody can corroborate or falsify whether that's a real document 10 days before his death, on November.
I don't want to distract you, but do you know about the Marilyn Monroe letter and the wiretap?
No, yeah, tell me about this.
So she was.
We'll get back to the Grush. Yeah,
we'll get back to the Grush, but she was shacked up with both of the JFK brothers, right? I know that, the Kennedy brothers. Sorry. And there was I think it was released through FOIA. It was definitely authenticated. There was a released wiretap from one of her phones in her apartment where it was basically relaying information that she'd been giving to an investigative journalist on the phone, and talking about basically booking this tell-all press conference about the Kennedy brothers and strange things going on in space, or like something said in a very Marilyn Monroe way about like weird things that they told her about space and about the moon and things. And then literally, I think it was like the date of the wiretap, like 2 days later, she was dead, man.
Is that a real recording? Does that exist out somewhere?
You'll have to like definitely Google like Marilyn Monroe Kennedy wiretap. Like, it will come up with this like declassified document that essentially seems to suggest that she was assassinated. But it came up in a couple of documentaries. But it just shows that, these are things that people don't really know about, that do exist, that have kind of come to the surface, but they're just not talked about. It's obscure knowledge. This is what people like you and me and others are doing, trying to bring obscure knowledge to the forefront.
It's completely. And it's like pre-marginalized, like the moment you say like a certain sort of.
Oh my God. Yeah. By design.
It's 100% by design. How I got hooked up with
David Grush. Yeah. David Grush.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I had a friend who had served in the Air Force, and he then went on to serve in the Space Force. And I was like, dude, I'm kind of a space geek generally, and I invest in space and stuff. And I was like, dude, you got to tell me what you know about UFOs. And he's like, well, man, I don't know much. But he's like, I have a friend you have to meet. And I was like, interesting. And I met Dave around then. And I think he kind of he's always kept his cards close to his chest, generally speaking, because he has so much classified information, but even closer to his chest, with everything, then we've gotten to be friends since then.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, he was like probably sussing me out, and I think his first impression of me was like, who's this insane guy? Like, this guy's asking me like ridiculous, wacky questions all over the place. I think he probably saw that part in the interview where he's like, sometimes I hang up and I'm like, this guy's crazy or whatever. And yeah, we've just hit it off since then. And I'm, in some ways, he sort of kept me, I become very cynical in spots. Like, part of the reason I like didn't actually put out an interview for 9 months between Graham Hancock and him was actually around the time those objects were being shot down, and NORAD widened its sensors. You had that object over Alaska, and it was a Chinese spy balloon, and then NORAD widened its sensors, and then you had all these weird UFOs or whatever.
Yeah.
I think those UFOs were BS. Yeah, exact quote unquote, exactly. And I felt like there was a cynical, weird sort of conflation going on between that and like real UFO, like what I would call like a real UFO or whatever, in a way to maybe create an auspice to kind of clamp down.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is weird. Like I don't want to be like a part of that. And so I kind of took off for a while. And all of that's to say is I've been very cynical in spots since 2017 in investigating the topic. And somebody like Dave, who's so earnest and idealistic, and as was displayed by the episode with him, is also autistic and pretty pure in intention, has kind of kept me going in my own sort of investigation in many respects.
I think the thing is when someone like this comes up, and it always seems to happen, kind of splits people into different camps of thought. So you got those who are truly just 100% all in, dude's a hero, Stan McGrush, those kind of people, right? Then you have the ones who are saying he's part of the controlled disclosure. This isn't organic. It's it's an artificial construct. He's been instructed to play a role. And as a high-level intelligence officer, he's able to play that role quite well. Then you have people like myself who are kind of sitting there thinking, all right, like the guy seems legit, he seems honest, I think he believes what he's been told, but I want to know who was feeding him information and where they were getting that information from, And until I don't know, man, like until I get that kind of thing, I don't want to cash my chips in any which way. I need a little bit more information about what he's been told and the fidelity of that data. So what would you say to the mixed bag of opinions? Like,
I would say keep an open mind. I've never wanted to be like to evangelize. I don't know for sure. It's all of this is probabilistic. Like, I trust him. And so, and he's brought, supposedly tens of people who've directly handled the material, like first-hand people, to the Inspector General.
Well, this is who I want to see. This is where I want to see it go,
Me too. And so look, it's an exciting time, because if that's a lie, that's going to be falsified very quickly. It's a bold fucking lie.
For real.
And so I after all my interactions with him, I do tend to trust him, but I think you have to think probabilistically with all of this stuff. And anybody who definitively tells you a thing is true without having seen the thing is full of shit. So I always want to kind of make that clear with all of this stuff I'm doing. I think the duty of science is to speculate. That's where stuff, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, I'm not going to debate a guy who's, sitting on classified information. Well, there's a ton of open source information. And the second we have definitive proof of aliens, then it's not a debate. Then you're just this person who's sitting back waiting for everybody, for the consensus to shift first. You should be on the forefront pushing the consensus.
Yeah. No, he doesn't acknowledge open source information. Like Neil Tyson seems to have decided that there's no credibility to this, to the point. But like he's done it in that really annoying way where it's like, oh, it's so obviously not something sensible. I don't even need to look into it. Like, I don't even need to justify looking into it. I already know, because I'm so smart, that this is just a stupid conversation and I don't need to take it seriously. He's like the worst kind of hubris, because he refuses to even attempt to challenge his own narrative and perception. He just says, nope, I don't believe it. There was one thing real quick, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's just, it really pissed me off with Neil Tyson when he was on the news and someone was talking about one of the UFO cases. It might have been the Tic Tac or something, and they were, going, but it's unidentified. We don't know what it is. And he was like, it's unidentified, and I'm okay with that. I was like, what do you mean you're okay with that? Like, as a scientist, how the hell can you be okay with that?
Yeah, that's amazing. No, that's a
flies in the face of every kind of genuine avenue of scientific adventure. It's like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? I mean, that's why people think he's paid off. I don't know.
So emblematic of who he is. And
Yeah.
he's a part of a lineage where, J. Allen Hynek was initially a detractor, then he became more open-minded. As soon as he became more open-minded, Carl Sagan went from very open-minded, if you read his diaries as a young person,
Yeah.
listen to like his early stuff,
To
went from being
shifting.
open-minded, being a detractor. And
Yeah.
then you have Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's, it does feel paid off because anomalies in science are harbingers of the next scientific paradigm. If you look at black body radiation in the 1860s, that led, the quantum revolution in the early 20th century explained black body radiation. Relativity explained the flight path or orbit of Mercury in a way that the Newtonian paradigm could not. So looking at anomalies is productive. It's sort of science 101. And I don't know what else to say. I don't need to be a credentialed expert to say that. Like you can read,
Right.
Thomas Kuhn, Structure of Scientific Revolution. It's sort of garden variety basic science, and you become a spokesperson. You're not a scientist. You're
Well, this is the thing that these are the popular social commentators of science, right? They're the ones on the documentaries. It's the the Neil Tysons and the Brian Coxes, and then it was the before then the Carl Sagans and Bill Nye the Science Guy. Like these are all the kind of friendly, smiling faces of mainstream science and communicating it to the general population. So it's interesting that Brian Cox is like kind of really closed-minded on UFOs, and Neil Tyson's really closed-minded on UFOs, and it's just like, I wonder if that's just a knee-jerk consensus reaction to being in the kind of surface academic world and coming through a narrow corridor of thought as you went through your degrees, and eventually just kind of being relatively restricted in your ability to think outside of the box, or if they're paid off. Like it kind of feels like it boils down to those two things. You're either completely shut in academically to your little consensus, or you're actually being given an incentive to not be curious about this. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And like in Sagan's case, he worked on a project called Project A119, which was a top secret classified program for the Air Force.
Right.
Plan of which was to possibly detonate a nuke on the moon. And this was
okay, yeah, I know this.
And so it's like, yes, in some cases I think these people know more than they let on, and then they sort of are, have to stand at kind of a party line. In other cases, I think they're just very smug, and I hate to use this, but like midwits. Like they're like in the middle. They're like the overeducated middle of the bell curve.
100%.
Whereas people who elitists might call are uneducated, quote unquote, actually have like the proper instincts, and like they should be just trusting their own epistemology and their eyes and what they see.
Yeah. And
then like the hyper intelligent are often mystically oriented.
Right. Well, these are the same people that would laugh at Nikola Tesla or like, some of the other brilliant inventors and creators of our time. They'd like shrug them off. And they're the most brilliant people, actually. They're the shining examples. And so you're right. It's the kind of average lab coat Joes that don't have inspiring ideas and just regurgitate the consensus, and then actually challenge people that have a better idea that challenges the consensus. It's just, it's the way it's always been, right?
Totally. Yeah. It's the people that rest on their educational credentials, right, and like haven't actually contributed, because contribution, I think, takes humility and knowing that there's so much we don't know, and that there's a half-life of facts, and facts generally get overturned very quickly. And so you should just your job is to poke at that at all times. It's not to defend we're over-indexed on the sort of citadel of information, the kind of well-kept establishment. We're over-indexed on skepticism. If science is sort of this, balancing act between skepticism and dogmatism, we have too many like Michael Shermers. Like we right. haven't made enough progress, and that maybe that hasn't always been the case. Like maybe in the 20s through 50s, with the advent of like insane border science and nukes, maybe we needed to put a little bit of a lid on it. I don't know. Now we're not. Now we got to restart things, and I think we just have too many of these smug midwits, detractors who just don't look at the actual information.
Yeah, I agree, but I do get the sense that we're kind of on that precipice. Like I feel like it's a really crazy time to be alive, because it does feel like we're kind of occupying this weird, like kind of gray area between an old paradigm dying and a new paradigm beginning. It feels like we're right on the verge of something quite multifaceted, like an evolutionary acceleration that's being facilitated through the various, catalysts of our modern era. So this would be the medium of societal norms and values transforming rapidly, which it is. This would be the geopolitical dynamics of our time, going through rapid transformation, which they are. Of course, then through our technological development, specifically on, I would say, the cutting edge of energy, superconductor technology, quantum computation, processing, simulating, and then, of course, AI, our developments in AI, our expressions of AI. When these things merge, which I kind of feel like they're going to do, especially quantum computers and artificial intelligence, when those types of things merge, what happens after that? What can we predict, and what kind of doors open after that? How can you maintain the consensus we have now after that? You know what I mean? So this is what I feel like we're on the precipice of, and it's very difficult to know what comes next.
I think it's very difficult to know. And then it feels sort of analogous actually to the 1920s in some sense. You had quantum theory stuff, accelerating at dramatic pace. You had jazz, you had expressionism in art, you had like cubism and everything felt sort of like reality felt like it was being sort of stilted, and something was pouring through into the earth or into the ether or something, and great ideas were sort of everywhere, and it was taking place simultaneous to a broad kind of social and geopolitical global breakdown. And it feels like we're on the precipice of something like that again, which is both scary and exciting. And then on the AI and quantum stuff, it's always really hard to predict how this stuff sort of goes. But I think I don't know. I think broadly, like maybe the AI stuff is kind of a distraction, and it's, you can kind of just, AI is just computer science, and the main application of AI is just consumer apps, and those are pretty dystopian and bad for us. And then the more exciting kind of applications around AGI are actually much farther off than we think, and so you might still get a bunch of like web productivity gains, but like I think in terms of making our lives way better, I'm just not sure if it sort of does that. And so I don't know.
I don't know, man, because like I mean, I've spoken to a few people in that whole field, especially in kind of like computational trend analysis. I've got a good friend of mine who's in that field, and do you know Deep Prasad?
Yeah, I know Deep.
Yeah. I thought you'd know Deep, and a few others who would say that even like the more conventional technologists would say that there's like a rapid decrease in the timeline towards AGI, and I don't know. I mean, like I know what you're saying, but in terms of like utilities, but it's increasing at such a rapid pace. I just think that if for example something like artificial intelligence and quantum computation come together, I feel like that's probably the precursor for AGI. Like it has to be like some weird melding between a quantum system and this artificial intelligence, and then I don't know, it's like that feels like it could be right around the corner, not in 100 years or even like 50 years. It could be in the next 30-40 years, like
right. Well, I just think the specifics matter so much, and on the AI front, it's like if you look at actually like what progress have we made over the last 5 years with LLMs, and it's been mainly progress in natural language understanding and the ability to the interface between natural language and code and what you can do on the internet has become like the latency there has become way tighter.
Right.
And that is really exciting. You do a bunch of stuff. You can like type in natural language, like I want to build an app, and you can build that app, and you can, ChatGPT is like really cool. And, GitHub Copilot, like super, you're going to see a bunch of productivity gains. And then I still think it's just token prediction and stats on steroids. And the people that are like, oh, this is analogous to human consciousness, I'm sort of skeptical of that. I think human consciousness is way trippier. Now, you bring up something interesting with the combination of quantum and AI. I think the brain is
exactly. I mean, like a bio-computational quantum computer of some form.
I think so. I mean, this is where we're getting into super speculative territory, but this would explain the connection between remote viewing and UFOs, because you can reverse temporal sequences in quantum computations. You can reverse, qubit positions. So maybe on the kind of semantic application layer, you can send information back in time. A lot of serious people have hypothesized that. And so if you're a remote viewer and maybe the quantum part of your brain is the basal ganglia with the caudate nucleus and putamen, which Gary Nolan at Stanford always talks about, is part of your brain that seems to intuitively just deduce what the answer is without like the big data, which again, big data would be a classical computing requirement or whatever. This is like you'd make the weird kind of counterintuitive move in a game like Go or something on an fMRI, that part of the brain lights up. So if that part is a quantum computer, which again, we're in very speculative territory, maybe these remote viewers are glitching into the future, seeing UFOs and sending the information back in time, which is a fascinating concept. There's a really good book by actually a National Institute of Health science writer. That's his day job, but he wrote this amazing book called Time Loops, and his name is Eric Wargo.
That sounds familiar. Familiar.
He's awesome. And I actually had to cut there was a little segment kind of dedicated to his book in the Grush thing, and I want to give him a big shout out at some point in another show. We had to cut it, but he goes really deep into that.
Yeah, that's the whole kind of remote viewing really was the beginning for me, dude. Like remote viewing was the first trail on the rabbit hole that led down into UFOs. And I remember at the time I was working as an insurance agent of all things. It's the only time I've had an office job, and I would never go back to it. It was not my style. And you can tell it wasn't my style because about 9 months into it, I was like doing all this research, and I was like sending the entire office like a CC email of like, hey, did you know the CIA was looking into psychic abilities and all this shit? So I was like definitely not suited for standard coffee talk in the office. I'm not that kind of person. But yeah, I remember like that was the first thing I started looking into was remote viewing and kind of chipping into that. What was it for you? Like, how did you end up kind of being led into looking at UFOs and remote viewing?
Yeah.
What sparked that whole interest?
It's funny, similar to you, not really remote viewing per se, but I grew up like kind of loosely a fan of like Rupert Sheldrake and morphic fields, and my dad's a psychologist and he was a big fan of Rudolf Steiner. Who's this weird and I could never, it was always like in the back of my head, like I could never square this like weird esoteric belief system and the idea of mind over matter with the scientific paradigm. And so I was always sort of very compartmentalized in that respect, but it was kind of latent inside of me, like maybe there is something to this mind over matter stuff. And then I met a friend who's like a very, very rigorous thinker, kind of high agency individual. Like he's in finance, like he has a very conventional job, but his job prior to that was he was high up in the Princeton parapsychology lab.
Right.
And I started to take some deep dives with him, and he worked on random event generators, these sort of
they're great. Yeah.
Amazing. Produce ones and zeros based on something that's, we think of as random in quantum mechanics, like radioactive isotope decay. And you see on this graphical interface, you see 1 0 1 0. And with an observer present, you get a statistically significant skewing effect towards the ones or the zeros based on, what the person sort of intends towards. And so it's one of these things where like the experimental protocol is hard to argue with. Like if, as a materialist, it's hard to argue with. And so hearing more about that from him and, understanding his worldview a little bit better, I started to go down kind of the proverbial rabbit hole. And I was probably more into parapsychology before I even got into UFOs, actually. So yeah, that definitely made me interested in UFOs, because I think the dirty little secret about UFOs is it's incredibly connected with the parapsychology stuff. And then there's a reason I didn't go that deep into it with the Grush interview, and it's because it's totally stigmatized. But like I had to be like, I think like physics might have been concealed because of anti-gravity in the 50s or 60s. I think it definitely was concealed because of like what like Wigner and von Neumann were talking about, which is like, that like anywhere in the causal chain of wave function collapse, any one of those things could be causing the actual collapse, including, the human mind or brain.
Yeah.
And then all the quantum field theory, every quantum thinker entertained that idea at one point. And it's so funny to me that we like listen to like Sean Carroll. And Sean Carroll's a great writer. I'm a big fan, but like, we like these guys are like, the priests, the high priests of today. But it's like, if you read like Schrodinger, whose wave equation defined, like literally
super esoteric.
Completely. He named I think it was his dog or his cat Atman or something. He was super into Upanishads. And and he completely entertained the idea that maybe the mind was doing the wave function collapse. And it's hilarious that we like now completely write that off as like a joke or something.
Yeah, I mean, oh God, I've got so many thoughts bustling through my head. I completely agree with you, and consciousness, I think, is at least one of the keystones to the UFO subject. And I've had my own experiences. Literally, were the reason why I started my platform, why I started this channel, why my life took a very drastic turn in the direction it has with the research I'm doing. And those experiences were consciousness related, and we can get into that if you've never heard those experiences. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, you're right about the science. I think are you a fan of Terence McKenna? I feel like you probably are.
Yeah, I love Terence McKenna.
Yeah, so I feel like this is the archaic revival. We're seeing this revival of kind of ancient mystery school teachings and methodologies and principles, but they're going to be revisited within a more modern scientific lens. But they are being revisited. I mean, even the fact that we're now mapping the DMT space intravenously, Imperial College London, and trying to understand these things scientifically and having encounters with astral entities in a scientific lab. I mean, these are, to me, the signs that we're maybe moving back towards something like this, like a kind of techno shamanism, where you've got the best of both worlds meeting together. For so long, humanity was a shamanistic species, kind of in equilibrium with the planet. Now we've moved into this, intensely technological era, and perhaps the next stage is this kind of melding, a symbiosis between it, a bit like the whole symbiosis between mind and matter, and spirit and science, and physics and metaphysics, or intuition and logic. These kind of expressions of humanity, the shamanistic, spiritual, conscious, intuitive element of the human condition is going to start to kind of merge, even scientifically in a proven way, somehow, in like models and like hypotheses about things that we start to realize about the fundamentals of the universe. As we progress, we'll start to kind of have a lot more of an esoteric model develop, where we're going, well, okay, it's like a simulation, but it seems coherent. Like there's a responsiveness to it from observers, and it could be conscious. We don't want to say God. It's not God, but it's getting close. Like, you know what I mean? It's like this kind of weird thing where science is going to have to grapple with it. And real quick, I think UFOs in some way are kind of like a weird shining exemplar of what happens when spirit and science do mix together. You get this incredible transdimensional esoteric vehicle of some form,
Totally. And they're a good example of something that is archetypal, and probably the shape that we see is somewhat of a projection from the subconscious.
Right.
And that lost time is involved. People have marks and are implanted with things, and there's some intersection with the physical as well. And so it's this very interesting kind of intersection between worlds that you're sort of looking at. And I think people only see them, I think, in certain heightened states of consciousness.
Yes.
There's a nuclear connection. So it's like an interesting question to ask on the scientific frontier here is like, what's the connection between a heightened state of consciousness and the nuclear thing? Is there a connection there? Are we sort of high frequency biocomputers or something that are able to tap into this stuff. I don't know. But yeah, to your point around paradigm shift overall, I think the observed sort of line in the sand is breaking down. And so science, in its a kind of original Enlightenment, Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton form, involves a clear separation, that kind of Cartesian duality, mind and matter. And I think that is breaking down. And Rudolf Steiner actually wrote this Austrian philosopher, early 20th century. And he was really into this thing called anthroposophy, spiritual science. And he wrote a biography. He was a prolific writer. He wrote a bunch of books, and he wrote a biography of Goethe. And he writes that Goethe says that Goethe had his own UFO experience as well, which is an interesting side note. But Goethe says that the next epistemological paradigm, so not even science would be couched within epistemology. Mm-hmm. You have induction, you have deduction, you have different ways of knowing things. And obviously science is generally more inductive, although there's a theory component, which is more deductive. But he would say that the next epistemological paradigm, in Steiner's words, was cognition by identification. And so instead, we're moving from cognition by observation to cognition by identification. And even anthroposophy itself, which is Steiner's stuff, it's like you're not discarding your own sort of spiritual stuff going on, or your own kind of epistemology, your own reaction to the things going on in your subconscious. You can't fully separate that. And so I think that for all the people who are saying, science is slowing down, I think it's sort of is maybe in some sense we're reaching the Heisenberg limits, and then it's actually going inwards, and then it'll speed back up or something. So it's slowing down. Because in a materialist paradigm, I just don't know how much more we can do.
No.
But once you start to entertain the idea that, your mind can sort of affect things, again, at the very margins, especially in this sort of consensus reality, you open up the floodgates, and you can have way more progress.
Yeah. I mean, we already have evidence for this. I mean, just set aside random number generators and other sorts of methods. I mean, even the placebo effect is a pretty good demonstration of the power of the mind over the physical world, even if it's just your own body. Your ability to actually self-heal through intention and the belief that something is actually occurring, creating that effect. And to be honest, that's actually what kind of segues into me and my own experiences with the phenomenon, because that's what was happening for me. I'm sure you've heard of the term CE5.
Yeah.
So I never used Greer's method. I just kind of, term it as CE5 because that's the common terminology. The reasons, because I don't want to go into a long story. This is more about you than it is about me, but
I want to hear it.
Yeah, there's kind of a long backstory as to why I was in my back garden in the middle of the night trying to project my intentions towards having a form of contact with an unknown intelligence. There is a kind of a long storyline.
Longer, man. I want to hear the thread.
Well, it's an interesting thing, man, because I just think that there's a strange correlation between, kind of forms of trauma and having experiences with anomalous or kind of phenomenological expressions of things like UFOs or other types of anomalies. There seems to be some level of a correlation with people that have gone through some sort of traumatic event. Now, I haven't gone through a seriously traumatic event, but I was in a very kind of low time in my life when this kind of stuff started to pop up, and I was wow, how old was I, man? I was 21. I think it was I'm 28 now. It was 21, and I was just on coming out of university, and I was in a really low state. My kind of friendships had broken down at the time. My relationship with my girlfriend at the time had broken down. Everything was just kind of going wrong, Turns out in, long-term self-reflection, everything was going right, but it was going wrong at the time. It was building the blocks towards something else, but you don't see that. So at the time, it was just destruction, right? It was the whole kind of dark night of the soul kind of vibe. Everything was wrong. And then my dad actually, funnily enough, introduced me to a series of books. Now, I'm not the kind of person to run around saying like, books are going to like, completely change your mindset on something. But these books kind of did change my mindset at the time.
Yeah.
And there's a series called Conversations with God. Don't know if you ever heard of them.
Oh,
Yeah. It's an interesting series. It's a series of books called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, and they're kind of like channelings, like they're kind of like the raw materials and stuff like that. It's a channeled work. It's the guy's not looking at it from that perspective. He had like a Christian background and was like homeless for a long time, and then ended up writing these books where he claimed to have a communion with God. And trust me, I went into this like so skeptical. Like I was like, whatever. Like my dad was like, I really think that'd be beneficial. Like just give them a read. Anyway, I ended up reading them.
Yeah.
Really, really powerful books, man. Like, I don't know what to say in terms of the whole channeling thing, but really powerful books, which is basically like a whole kind of question answer format between him and God, like a voice in his head that was giving him intuitive answers that he was writing just, as immediately as they were coming to him. And they're really pretty profound answers to a lot of things. And it started to kind of open up my mind to, it basically introduced me to universal consciousness as an idea. Like when I was a little bit younger, like I just didn't really have a good definition for God or spirituality. And I just didn't really have anything that made sense to me. And these books kind of introduced an idea that was like, that makes more sense, like an energetic framework that's coherent in some way, that's infinite, and that we're within that system somehow. It made a bit more sense from the metaphysics perspective. And see, I'm already in a long-winded story. We haven't even got to the experiences yet. But I always feel like I need to lay the pipe for it, because it's a weird experience. It's a weird series of events. And so like, this is the justification for it, is that these books opened up my mind, kind of took me out of a depression, put me on a different path, like kind of researching and looking into a lot of different concepts. I'm a layman, I'm not a scientist, but I kind of delved into quantum mechanics and quantum theory and the more philosophical ideas around that, and consciousness and non-locality. And so I was kind of prepping myself for what happened next, which was, I actually ended up like about a year later getting into another bit of a slump. And this time it was this feeling I had of, I've like absorbed all of these different ideas about life and about reality, and got all these kind of like really esoteric perspectives, but none of it's really helping me in life. Like none of it's really, I'm not really happier. I'm actually maybe a bit more stressed out because I feel like I've got, you know what I mean? Like this whole kind of,
or it could be dark. It can lead you down the wrong path. Like it,
exactly.
You just have these like broken shards of like these people who like spout this like esoteric stuff, and it's like, but you're not really like healed as a person. Like you still have like a lot of shit to go through.
Yes, you just have more ways to describe it and break it down.
Yeah, a bunch of ways to describe it, and maybe it resonated with you at one point, and now you're like it's an echo. It's a faint echo of what it actually meant for you. But anyways, go on with.
No, you're absolutely right though. You're outlining it well. That's how it felt. I was kind of like, oh man, like what the fuck was the point in learning all of this stuff? I'm still feeling like whatever, like life's stressful. I've still got bills to pay, like so I was sitting on my bed, and I you can call it a prayer, but I was just kind of talking out loud to the universe, man. I was just like just give me something, like give me something that is representative of all this stuff that I've been learning, all this esoteric stuff, all this out of the box thinking. Like give me something I can do, something that's provable. Like if it's real and it's that important and I'm supposed to be learning this, then show me, like fucking show me it's real, and show me how I can like use this in some way. And then like a week later, my best friend was like, hey man, like you got to check out this documentary. It's like really, really cool. I was like, oh, what is it? He was like, it's called Unacknowledged by this guy called Dr. Stephen Greer. And at this time I had no foot in the game. Like I'd heard about UFOs and maybe read a book, but literally like not something I was kind of involved in, you know what I mean? So he it's like, yeah, you got to check it out. So we ended up watching the documentary, and it's good. It's a good documentary. They've got some great guys on there, like, the missile launch officers and people who are like high up in the Navy. And it was the first documentary that was introducing this subject to me in a more serious way. And I was like, I was sitting there like, shit, like, okay, this is cool. All right. Like, good documentary, man. But it was near the end of it where Stephen Greer gets into this whole thing about CE5. Suddenly he's talking about how you can actually interact with these things, and there's like a consciousness connection. And dude, because the week prior I've been sitting on my bed making that request, like immediately it was like a light bulb. Immediately I was like, oh shit, like this is the answer that I was, I was asking for proof of universal consciousness and like, these other things. And now there's a guy telling me that I can use my own consciousness in certain states to actually have evidence, like get contact or something will turn up. Are you kidding me? So and this is what I actually think for me personally was key, absolutely key, because this is really weird. Like it's very subtle and skeptics love it. And I don't blame them because it's like a really ridiculous thing. And it's a very strange, subtle bandwidth I think you have to be on. And because I'd been on my bed that week prior and it immediately went back to that in my mind when I watched that documentary, I kind of became a bit of a zealot, man. I was like a religious convert. I was like, that was an answer from the universe. I'm going out into my back garden. I'm going to start doing this. So I started like, getting into this meditative state, like just a basic meditative state. And I was out in my back garden. This was in 2019. And I was just starting to like kind of in my head, imagine that I was projecting my thoughts into the ether, like I was kind of just like saying like, if there's something out there that, believes in universal consciousness and this idea and like, kind of just philosophizing, like kind of asking the universe, like if there's something that has this idea or this idea and this, like show me, like turn up, like show me something. I want to see it. I'm ready to see something, And it started, man. Like I've always been watching the sky, like all the way through my life. I've loved watching the sky, and I grew up in North Wales. Like I said, we got crystal clear skies. Like I've seen the stars, I've seen meteorites, I've seen tons of satellites, and I started seeing things that were really weird, man. I started seeing initially a massive influx, and it gets weirder, by the way. I don't want to take up the whole interview of this, but I'll try and like wrap it up. You're enjoying it, yeah. I know. But all of the people listening are like, "Oh my fuck!" Like, I want to hear from Jesse Michaels. Anyway, I will try and wrap this up succinctly, but it's it's interesting, and it is like the whole reason I'm even doing what I'm doing. So I started seeing like a massive influx of what looked like satellites. Like it was white orbs. They weren't doing anything crazy, but there was a hell of a lot of them. Like they were turning up at like 15 or 20, not at the same time, but like within the space of 5 minutes, I'd see like 10, 15, maybe 20 of them. Like they just kept coming over in different directions.
In that general period in your life, like not just that night, like
no. When I was actively in my garden, like when I was actively doing it, right? Like at these moments, there was just this very weird increase, like a noticeable increase in traffic. Like you can, I can't really say it's anything else. But this continued for a couple of weeks. I'm going to try and skip through this, but not leave out any like critical details. Like. So, because it progressed, like this is the thing, this stuff progresses, and I think there's a reason for that, my own theory. So it was like these satellites, like loads of satellites, and then after about a week of doing this, some of these satellites started to, as they were coming over, start glowing really brightly, flash, and then come back down again. Now, I know about iridium flares and things like that. I know that some satellites catch the light, but this was happening like, I would have like 9 of them coming over, again, not at the same time, but over the course of like 10 minutes, and they would flash, and it would be in synchronicity with my thoughts. Like that's what was tripping me out. Is like, I would be like, hello, like, is that something? Are you something? And it would start glowing and flash, like as I said that. And it wouldn't just do that once. It would do it maybe 3, 4, 5 times as it was traversing, which these IR flares, they don't do that. Iridium flares don't do that. So it was getting weird. It started to get weird. But to fast forward, mate, August 2019, I was in my back garden doing what had become like my usual routine at this point, because I'd been seeing all this weird stuff and flashes of light. Also, another thing that you see really commonly, and it's actually been referred to as flash bulbs by the community of people around the world that try and engage in this kind of stuff. It's been termed as flash bulbs, which is literally, and I've seen this more times than I can count, man. And I have tried to get it on camera, but the thing is, you're literally just, it's a black sky and a little pinprick of light. Like that's all you can see on a conventional camera. You need like good night optics, which I don't have. So skeptics always use that excuse, but it's not easy, man. It's not easy getting footage of this stuff. But it'll just be a black void of space, clear space, like stars and everything, and then a bright white flash of light. You look up and you look at the general area, and then another bright white flash of light from just the same void of space, completely static, nothing moving, no discernible object. And I've seen like a flash happen like 10 times over the space of like 8 minutes or so in the same area of space, like not moving. You can't see an object. Like, what's that? Like, and it's doing it, it's flashing again, in synchronicity to what feels like responses to what you're projecting. This is all sounding very woo, but it's like, it's what happened to me. And then
okay, keep going.
No, go on, interject so people can hear you for a minute.
I was just going to say, what's your theory as to why it progresses? Why this?
Well, whatever this is, because I don't necessarily think it's alien, not in terms of like conventional like space aliens hanging out in spacecraft just waiting to turn their lights on or something. Like it just does not make sense. It makes a lot more sense to invoke like some form of amorphous consciousness or something that responds to human consciousness in a certain way. I can't really pin it any better than that, because I almost feel like it's the universe itself responding more than anything else. It's difficult to really kind of articulate, but not conventional aliens. And I kind of have the feeling that what it's doing is it's giving you a baby steps program for strengthening your consciousness, for like kind of expanding your consciousness. It's giving you this kind of reward-based system of a visual exhibition that's not too drastic. It's just enough. It's just enough to put you over the edge of skepticism into the domain of curiosity. It's like just enough, but it's not enough to give you a psychotic breakdown. You know what I mean? It's not just like, and like, here's the truth, like, zip, and like reality just, it's not DMT in real life. You know what I mean? It's like this very kind of like progressive, subtle, step-by-step kind of progression of phenomena. But then it did turn into something quite drastic, mate. It turned into something very profound. And that was really the ultimate catalyst for the channel. And basically after those events, like I just grabbed a camera, went out into the forest near me so no one could hear me, put a camera on a tree branch and was like, okay, so this happened, and just started talking about my experiences. And that's how it all started for me. That is how it all started, me trying to outline these experiences and what I think the science of the consciousness around it is. But yeah, so 2019, bro, I'm in my back garden looking up at the sky. It's a nice kind of like warm summer evening, and the first thing I saw a bright white flash of light, one of these flash bulbs, and I'm at the back of my garden looking towards my house. So I'm like right at the back, and there's like a path and then my house, and I'm looking up at the sky, and this bright white flash of light happens on the right hand side of my sky. And so I look up at that and I see again another flash of light, and then again another flash of light. And then it starts going a little bit lower each time. So it's like flash here, and then the next time here, next time here. So it's just like slowly making its way down the sky. So I was just looking at this thing. And then eventually it kind of lines up with two stars here. So it kind of forms the apex of a triangle almost. So there's two stars here and this one's at the top flashing. And I hadn't seen this behavior before, where it's like flashing a lot and moving around a little bit and then stopping, and you can't see an object. So you're just seeing this bright white, almost sequential flash, like sometimes a bit of a delay, but almost sequential. And then it just kind of loitered in this one spot above these two stars for honestly long enough for me to start looking around at other things. Like I was just like, wow, man, like, you're just chilling there. I got very casual with it at this point. I was, I don't know, maybe even disrespecting it, but I had a really profound experience. So I don't know, maybe not, but I was very casual with it. I was just like, sweet, all right, cool, like thanks for being here. I'm like, looking around the sky, anything else. And it was a clear sky, crystal clear sky. And my house is here. This thing's flashing on the right. I pan my head across, and I do like a bit of a double take, because there's this cloud, right? There's this cloud kind of just over here on this side, on the left-hand side. And I'm looking around and I see this cloud, and I kind of keep looking, and I look back at this cloud. And when I look back at it, I realize that there's something really weird going on with it. So it was like a dark cloud. It definitely looked like a cloud. It had kind of like this wispiness to it. It was dark, but it had this like, the best way to describe it when I actually started looking at it properly was it had this kind of light overlay of TV static. Like there was this shimmering, like a weird shimmering distortion field, something, I don't know. It was like a light static. The moment I clocked onto that, I was just like, oh, what are you? Like, that's not a cloud. Is that a cloud? Like, that looks really weird. And it was drifting. So if I've got my house here, it was drifting from the left-hand side of the sky. Eventually, basically with the trajectory, if we pretend the microphone's my house, it's going to go like that, completely past me. And I'm at the back of my house, right? I'm at the back of this path looking towards it, and this cloud eventually is going to go like that.
Yeah.
So it's important I outline that because there's this component in the story. So this cloud is going like this. It gets to here, and I kid you not, it does a 90-degree turn and starts coming towards me. Like, as in that. It does an abrupt jolting, like the cloud's going like this, and now it's going like this.
Yeah.
Complete 90-degree turn, bro. So now this weird staticky looking cloud is coming towards me in the sky, like down up. It's going to be above my head eventually. And so I have to admit, my heart skips a bit of a beat at this point because it's demonstrated this really abrupt turn. It's definitely not a cloud. It looks like one, but it's not one. And it's got this weird staticky effect to it. It gets above my head. And this, like, you know, Terence McKenna said something that's so true. He said that the thing with this kind of phenomena is it's so absurd that if you tell the absolute unvarnished truth, you will be taken for a fool. And it's the truth. It is the truth about this subject because things happen that are so radically unpredictable. Say again?
That might even be intentional.
Yeah, no, I think it is intentional. It's a really good way of disguising yourself because the ridicule hides the truth of it, right? Because this cloud got above my head and it dissipated in a matter of seconds. It literally, like within like a second and a half, it just like it did this, like sucked into itself. And there was a triangle formation of like 25 to 30 orange orbs of light, like in a full fucking triangle formation, just above my head, bro. And it didn't stop. Like it did this whole thing of like the cloud vanished, this triangle was revealed, and it kept moving. So I had to turn my head around and watch as it just went off into the distance. And then it went off into the distance and disappeared. And that was the first time I saw them. And by the way, that wasn't the last time I saw them, but that was the first time I saw them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. That's nuts.
Yeah.
So do you see E5 or does the phenomenon, does it still follow you around or happen to you, or is it?
Oh, like it's a weird one, bro. It's a weird one. Like I've kind of wrestled because because of, like I said, at the time when I first got the idea of doing the contact stuff, it was because of that kind of religious conversion, because I felt like a documentary answered a prayer from the universe. Like, you know, I was in a bit of a weird mindset, but at that time it felt right. At that time I was like, yes, 100%, like this is the answer. And I don't know, I guess maybe now I'm like a little bit more, like, you know, should I be doing this? Is this safe? Like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, this isn't hallucinations. I mean, maybe it's hallucinations. Maybe it's complex projections from the human brain. It could be like a tulpa, like the Buddhists call it a tulpa, like a psychic projection. But if it's not, if it's actually something responding to my consciousness, man, like, I don't know, like, should I be doing that? Like, I kind of feel intuitively, I kind of feel that stuff is benevolent. I actually kind of feel that this is something that is in some way trying to get us to wake up to a much grander expression of our own consciousness. And that's what it was doing for me, essentially, by showing up, was it was validating these really profound models about universal mind and non-locality. It was validating them because it was providing a visual piece of evidence for me personally. And so I really kind of tend to vacillate between how I feel about the contact stuff, because I don't know truly what it is, but I have feelings about what it might be. But are my feelings enough to justify fucking with this and dipping my toes into it? I don't know. Like, what do you think? I don't know, bro.
I think it's like a Kabbalistic or something. It's like two steps forward, one step back, and you probably need to be somewhat grounded and have, you know, a sangha or something, or if you don't have that, then you have to be willing to like face some pain and shed some exterior layers. And I think there are versions where it goes very awry. You don't want to step into the holiest of holies. If you're impure, it'll kill you.
You know?
And then they're like, but then there's like, it's like a worthy pursuit or something as well.
I think, you know, when you've had something shown like that, it does put that complicated spanner in the works for you, because it's like, you know, I mean, a lot of people have had experiences, but in terms of the global population, I'm still in the minority of people. And it's like, right, what do I do with this experience? Like, something has responded to my consciousness. It is clearly a lot more sophisticated than we are. It's just operating in, you know, the skies at will and flies around as these little like orbs of orange light. Like, you know, what do I do with this information? And I was also being led to this synchronistically through the things that I ended up reading and then the documentary. Like, you know, so for me,
that's the good sign, I think.
yeah,
That synchronistic stuff, you have to listen to that. And
I agree.
That's like really important. And if you're forcing a thing or you're looking for a result or you're instrumentalizing it, I think you're in for disillusionment or a bad time.
Yeah.
If you really if it's faith-based, I think it's good within reason.
Yeah, I agree. I know what you mean by that as well. Kind of like almost in intuitionally based. As a musician, I reckon you might understand this. You know, when you get into that kind of flow state when you're playing, and or maybe with something else that you do where you're just getting into that state of mind where there's no real effort behind it, and it's just kind of this effortless creative flow of information. Like, I get that when I'm playing guitar for sure. Like, you know, I'll sit there and just, you know, you get into that state and everything's just working, and then you go, that was really good, I'm gonna record it. You try and record it and it's shit because you're suddenly thinking about it way too much, you're analyzing it way too much. You're like, I've got to try and repeat that, and you never can. And that's that magical state right there, that magical state of kind of intuition and flux and flow. That is the state that gave us Nikola Tesla. It's also the state that gave us, you know, Buddha. It's the same state that's, you know, just given brilliance out in different ways across humanity. And I think that's also the same state that I was tapping into when I had these experiences, like a very kind of subtle flow of consciousness. Because there were times when I went out there, bro, like, this isn't like it was like every time was a fantastic result. There were loads of times where I went out, and just because, I don't know, of the bullshit of the day or whatever it was, like I wasn't in the right state of mind. You know, I thought I was like, I was out there, but then maybe I was like getting impatient. I started thinking about it too much. I was like, nothing's going to turn up, and then nothing happens. And then I'd be out there, maybe just sitting down, like maybe not even really thinking about making that kind of contact, just sitting down, looking at the stars. And then I'd just kind of slip into that very kind of subtle, almost meditatively feeling state of just looking out and thinking, and I'd see something. And so it's that state. And that's what makes me wonder, you know, is it a projection? Well, people have recorded it, so I don't think it is entirely a projection. It's been captured. It's been recorded. So what is this? What is it?
Well, is reality a projection? And then this is the most explicitly obvious part of the projection. So fantastical or something, or maybe in some ways it's more the root layer than the sort of, you know, lower, you know, forms and objects that we're seeing or whatever. It's so hard to say, but I mean, I do, my bias, and I have no idea, but I think that there are probably more levels to humanity than we I don't think we're at the highest level. And I think that there might be something we can ascend into that's sort of trans-temporal. And it sounds insane to say.
Well, not to me, brother, but I understand. It does sound insane to other people.
Yeah, but that would be my bias, is that, I mean, even if you, in a more prosaic way, look at the observables or whatever, it's like clearly they have some ability to manipulate or warp space-time. And so look at all the implications there. Like, why would they be doing what they're doing? I tend more towards the kind of non-Copernican. They're very interested in Earth specifically. Yeah. And the teleology of Earth. And so it's like, we have 20 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way, but we have 1 trillion non-Earth-like planets. What's the likelihood of evolutionary convergence to these hominid-like creatures that we kind of consistently see, sort of anthropocentric and human hubris that these are these like sort of, you know, space aliens, and maybe they are, and it's probably a false dichotomy as well. Like, you can probably like travel to the stars if you can travel through time, but to me, they seem to be like actually Deep has a great idea about this sort of cellular automata idea, or Jacques would say using absurdity and, B.F. Skinner like intermittent reinforcement, where they can kind of nip at the herd. And it's like if you're like managing an ant colony or whatever, you wouldn't really care which ants you would just sort of, it would be like, you're a shepherd with sheep or something.
Yeah.
You sort of, make sure you get them all in line by like, pitting one of them or whatever. I have no idea how as an LA city slicker, clearly how shepherding works, but you know what I mean? Like it's almost like the least amount of intervention necessary to steer the ship. And to me, that's what it feels like is going on here. And even to taking it one step further, 52% of these alien abductions are reported to be hominid-like, and then 85% of those, I'm going off the free Edgar Mitchell database of abduction.
Yeah.
Very low sample size, unfortunately, because the science is very scant and all this stuff. But 85% of those interactions are friendly. And so I think in some ways they might be sort of, I hate to use the word future because I think our understanding of time is way off, but higher future, transtemporal, whatever versions of ourselves that might be fighting for their own sustenance, but have like these like sort of non-intervention rules, if that makes sense. And so they're like these weird prime directive, it's like Star Trek. You have the prime directive, right? You can't, interact too much with sub-warp drive civilizations. There seems to be something like that going on. And I think that would answer a lot of the questions around nuclear.
Do you think that they're affecting it? Like, what do you think of the whole idea that nuclear and atomic testing is having like some form of transtemporal, transdimensional effect that we don't understand? And maybe that's what ushered in this sudden contact in the 40s, was that, we're impacting a reality that's like sandwiched next to our own.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's like an EMP blast that comes from the nukes that like goes into, pops into their timeline and like, causes them to crash or whatever. My instinct is that they're so sophisticated that it's mostly protecting their resources and preserving timelines. So it's not as much that. It might be that like levels of energy density get you to a certain understanding of ontology and understanding of how the world works. And you look at what is CERN trying to do. It's getting to higher and higher levels of energy density with these electric plasma thrusters. So why not, when we have a stepwise, unprecedented leap in energy output with the atom bomb and Oppenheimer, why wouldn't you sort of possibly, as an ancillary effect of that, gain new insight into like how generally the world works? And there's actually an interesting book called UFO Secrecy and the Fall of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And, it's this guy, Donald Burleson, is this Air Force guy, and it makes this kind of crazy case, who knows if this is right, but that maybe Oppenheimer's stripping of his Q clearance had more to do with UFOs than people realize.
Right.
And it's one of these books where it's like, it's really hard to corroborate whether it's right or not, because it's like 3 or 4 interesting things interspersed with like a lot of speculation. But one of the interesting kind of just pure quotes from it that I'm pretty sure is on record and right is von Neumann. John von Neumann is, famous Hungarian physicist who's, notoriously a genius, created the mathematical foundations for quantum mechanics. He's
the whole idea of the von Neumann probe or machine, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he is defending Oppenheimer, and he says something really interesting. He says it took Oppenheimer a while to get adjusted to the Buck Rogers universe that we're living in. And Buck Rogers, of course, this comic strip from that time that's all about time travel and aliens and whatever. And so, maybe there is insight you get into how the world works from different levels of energy output. And maybe there's something in the human body that can ascend to that as well, that, has access to that. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that Oppenheimer was, quoting the Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that. Like, again, it echoes back to the occult influence within some of this stuff. There's that famous video of him looking, extremely somber and serious when he's addressing the whole thing of the nuclear test, the atomic tests. And quotes the Bhagavad Gita about being, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, and it's like this really emotional moment. So I think that there's probably some truth to that statement about him adjusting to something he wasn't particularly aware of prior to joining the Manhattan Project. It's all speculation until we actually get some level of real evidence for this stuff. But these are the threads. These are the threads within the narratives, within the UFO lore, within all of this. And I think as well, man, like a really important element is the occult, is this intrinsic connection with the UFO field and belief systems that sprung up over like the last 80 years or so. A lot of their roots can trace back to things like Helena Blavatsky, the Theosophical movements of the late 1800s, which kind of persist up to this day. Some of the core tenets of theosophy and other occult ideologies are even echoed by some of the people responsible for the revival of the UFO conversation in government since 2017. So you interviewed Hal Puthoff. He was part of Scientology. He kind of made it seem like he was just a casual interest in Scientology, but he was actually OT level 8, like Thetan level 8, which is like the highest level of Scientology you can ascend to. So, you don't get to that kind of level without a lot of dedication. Then you got Jim Semivan, CIA. He's obsessed with the Chris Bledsoe case, which involves a kind of prophetic vision of what some believe to be an expression of the ancient Egyptian god Hathor. Then you have Lou Elizondo. During an interview, he tried to explain the fundamentals of reality and drew the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone. Eric Davis described himself and Hal and others within the whole kind of National Institute of Discovery Science framework as the sacerdotal knights of national security. You heard that one? The sacerdotal knights of national security?
No. What is that even in reference to? What are the...
So that was on a letterhead between some of the NIDS guys. It was like CC'd from...
What does he even mean by that?
So sacerdotal is like a theological term. It's kind of like for a doctrine which ascribes sacrificial functions and like spiritual supernatural powers to a priest. So he's basically calling him and his cadre the supernatural priests of the national security state. Then you've got, like Peter Lavender. He was involved in TTSA. He co-authored the Secret Machines books for TTSA. He's in Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO church. He's also responsible for writing the Necronomicon. You know the Necronomicon?
I don't. What is it?
It's like referenced in so many films throughout the years. Like it's kind of like always the occult book reference, like this demonic book, the Necronomicon. It's in all the kind of pentagram drawing scenes in films. They flip open the Necronomicon. That was Peter Lavender. So all of these guys, like the reason I brought that up is like all of these guys, and they're in the same kind of like they run in the same network. They're really into the occult, man. Like, they're really into that stuff. And they understand the implications for the UFO subject with that.
Yes. Yeah, I never know what to think of it. I mean, you didn't even mention Jacques Vallée.
And Jacques Vallée, of course.
Group, the Invisible College, which was, oil reference. And
Yeah. Well, this is the Invisible College. Like, these are people who are part of that whole thing, right? And this is what they believe.
Yes, I never know whether to, that's like this big kind of red herring distraction or how real it is. I mean, clearly, given the stuff I've already talked about in this interview, like I have an interest in some kind of more esoteric thinkers, and then I think there are a lot of strains of thought in that field that also get very dark, and one shouldn't, if it's not in step with sort of spiritual progress, I think it can be very bad to just, it's like staring directly at the sun or something. And so, it's always hard to calibrate how much, investigating you should do of stuff like that. But I do find it very interesting that there's this alternative, civilizational history. If you look at what would they say, like the Hyperboreans, the Lemurians, the Atlanteans,
Right.
these sort of civilizational cycles, and then obviously all these sort of latent capacities of human beings. And then I always don't know exactly how to score, was Jack Parsons' interest in his involvement in the OTO and his summoning of opening portals and doing weird sex magic rituals,
Yeah.
and doing past life regressions where he's Simon of Magus or whatever, are these kind of a feature or a bug? Is this just this
Right.
this sort of correlates with this like high agency like weirdo who you'd have to be like so uncorrelated with the consensus to like get into rocketry to begin with, and so maybe this is just baggage that comes along with it, or was that somehow actually instrumental to the early parts of our space program, and Werner von Braun and the Russian equivalent Tsiolkovsky, it's like an essential part, or is it just like this weird sort of like accidental thing that gets attached to like these really right tail people who are so outside of the norm? And I don't know.
I mean, no, you're right. It's difficult to know, man. It can be the quirks of an interesting mind and an interesting perspective that, they're giving us rockets and all sorts of like things, and they're also really involved in some weird shit in their back room. But I don't know, man. Like it's very interesting to me though. The things like occult practices are kind of a little bit about hacking the algorithm. They're kind of about, if you're looking at it in simulation terms, it's like breaking the algorithm. And UFOs seem to exist beyond the algorithm. They seem to exist in the, so like this is why there's this interesting correlation between occult groups, and occult doesn't have to mean bad. Like, it's not all blood and sex magic and like crazy dark stuff. Like occult just means like non-traditional religious views, really. Not part of monotheism or some other kind of like established structure. So occult's kind of an interesting area to dive into, and I definitely think that there's some reality to the up and the down to it. So you're right, you got to be careful. You got to tread with care in that kind of subject. But it is interesting that there is this correlation between occult practices and belief systems and ufology, and a lot of the roots within ufology now, like the whole kind of star seeds and the raising of consciousness, the age of Aquarius. This is all theosophical and Crowleyism talking points, man.
Sure. Yes, I sort of prefer Gnosticism because I would say there's a ton of overlap, obviously, with the occult, but I guess the occult feels like, you're trying to instrumentalize or systematically study the hidden. And that feels, for whatever reason, more nefarious to me than mysticism as an idea. Is like you are attempting connection with God outside the institutional framework, which I think is really a cool concept.
I like the way you described it as well.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's all of this stuff is really interesting. And then, I always struggle with like, I don't know how much I should be reading this stuff. Like and like the unholy alliance. Like, did the Nazis like partner with the tall whites in the, in the World
This is
War
where
II?
you start. This is where you start spiraling down the Mandelbrot, and how far do you want to go?
You end up with this version of reality that's like so apart from the consensus that it's tough. And obviously, I'm interested in a lot of it, but
yeah, man, sitting around the family dinner table trying to talk about Nazis and the tall whites, like, good luck.
Right. I think the maybe the most productive places we can spend our time is like marrying science and the spirit, and so I mean, and maybe that is a Rosicrucian idea, pre-enlightenment,
kind of.
But I would say, the way you do that is not by like going down these like just bizarro rabbit holes in alternative history, and then you think you're special because you read this one, like nobody else has read, or whatever. But it's like, well, I'll give you an example. I talked a lot about a guy named Townsend Brown. And,
big fan of, yeah.
So Townsend Brown, is mid-century inventor, clearly was, he's working on anti-gravity his whole career. The nominal perception of him is that he, is this kooky hack who didn't make a ton of progress. He's sort of associated with a bunch of, I think, disinfo that was deliberate on his part to throw people off the trail, like the Philadelphia experiment, where the crew is zapped from a port in Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia, or whatever. Like, it's insane. And anyways, I sort of revive him as a character in the Rush documentary, where it's like, okay, a lot of this was probably disinfo. He actually probably made a little more progress than people realize. His stuff probably made it into deep black aerospace. The B-2 bomber uses a Byfield Brown effect. It's, he uses an electrokinetic effect on its wings to reduce drag. It's probably not propulsion. It's, more drag reduction. Still, with all the stuff he was into and all the people he was talking to, especially in these top secret atomic programs, to know that his work actually did make it into deep black aerospace, and then at the same time, one of his patrons, Agnew Bainson, is sort of funding what we now know as modern physics, which is kind of an offshoot of quantum gravity, which came from his Chapel Hill conference. All of these threads are really interesting. And so anyways, my point is, I could go way deeper on Townsend Brown. Townsend Brown is super into time travel. He was really into And I decided not because it's like too much all at once or whatever. And I talked about time travel being related to this, and so maybe I could have tied that better in the actual documentary now that I'm actually saying it out loud. But the point is, like, I think so many people are like stuck at home plate, like they're not even on first base or whatever. And so
it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. So let's focus on the stuff that like can open up people's worldview to just like, this stuff is real and this is it.
Yeah. Well, I think
go for it. Yeah.
No, sorry. I'm just, all I was going to say is that's kind of what we can see happening with just the like Nimitz, Navy and the process is like, kind of bringing people to that surface level. But it is incredibly multifaceted, like the subject. I mean, like you said, we've gone from like Nazis and Tall Whites to T. Townsend Brown to consciousness and contact initiation to, like theosophy. It's such a ridiculous mixed bag. It's like, how the hell do you dress this up in a palatable way for the masses? It's kind of impossible without basically kind of downplaying what it is, which is kind of what's happening with the disclosure process right now. Is like, yeah, we're getting some information, kind of, not really, to be honest, nothing crazy in terms of like proof and everything. They're just buttering us up a little bit. Yeah,
well, that's where, see, I think people's cynicism is like the whole thing. Like, people are like, it's all fake. It's all fake. And that's where I would agree with the underlying cynicism or something, but I would just say, point it differently. And it's probably not all fake, but maybe we're getting the tip of the spear of knowledge that we had in the 40s or something. And this is like, it's like an extended, 70, 80 year FOIA or something, where you're just getting the ontological truth that this shit is real, and you can't even handle that. So it's like it's like, I don't know if you're worthy of more than that or whatever. And so that's where I might be cynical if I'm, just a person looking at this. Is my bias is that it is real, and then maybe it's like the least important part of it, or there's so many levels deeper, and it's like I don't even think you would understand or comprehend levels deeper if it sort of came out. And again, this is my own, I don't know shit, but like, this is my own speculation,
Yeah, I mean, but I think the thing is, people don't really care. Like, outside of this fringe group, like, people, I have so many people in my life that have just been like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, that's it, done. Like, oh, did you know that this guy, like a GS-15 level Pentagon program official, was actually like, he's talked about his stuff under oath in Congress. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And then that's it, done. Like, that's it, back to normal life. They won't think about it again. And so, like, that's a lot of people. So I actually think they can handle more, because they don't give a shit, man. Like, people are more concerned with the fact that, like, their living circumstances are getting way harder, and that, people are just struggling. So I think that there's, like, we live in a world right now where, like, the agenda list for people in terms of their, like, day-to-day aliens and disclosure is extremely low down on that list unless you're like a part of the concerted research effort and like, you know, activism circle. And then you think it's the most important thing that's ever been addressed in the history of humanity. And I think that there's a component of it that is, but there are some other important issues on the world stage happening right now as well. So like, you know, I kind of understand. I do get it. And people just don't trust government either, man. So like, you know, when it comes to disclosure, I mean, I read like, you know, the YouTube comments on like CNN talking about, you know, US Navy pilots or something. So you're getting comments from people that are not in the UFO research community, more of like a population consensus from online. And most people are like, this is a distraction from the presidential elections, or this is a distraction from this, or like, you know, so most people just don't fucking trust the government at all.
Totally. And they have an a priori distrust for anything coming out of the government. They think the government's a monolith. They don't think there are factions within the government fighting for objectives. And it's tough with those people because one side has to be right. Like Blue Book was like an anti-UFO psyop, like the, you know, the Robertson panel, which was classified at the time, clearly like anti-UFO psyop. I would say the Condon Commission was also an anti-UFO psyop. That's speculation. Clearly tons of anti-UFO psyops early on. And then now people are saying this is like a pro-UFO psyop. You can't really have it both ways. And my bias would be like the psyops early on were distracting from the truth. And then this thing might be like, you know, with the caveat that I fully trust David Grush. And I think he's like a very emergent phenomena where he organically bumped into all of this stuff. And then are there sort of factions that are more cynical and like have ulterior motives? Like, I think so. And are they maybe trying to do things in like a specific way and like manage stuff? Like probably, if I had to guess. And so, yeah, but you can't have it both ways, right? Like you can't have the government like lying in an anti-UFO way in the 50s and 60s, and then all of a sudden now they're like super pro-UFO. Like you have to have a belief in some sort of underlying truth. And so you're either believing the government then or you're believing it now. And I tend to believe, you know, the government now more. And then I just think, again, like per our conversation, I think there's like so much more underneath the surface.
Well, I think that like, I think that there are definitely some hidden components within the structure of this disclosure that's coming like kind of through the different chambers of government bureaucracy and the defense intelligence architecture. Like there's definitely some kind of hidden faces at the back room that are maybe making declarations of how this is being handled or how they're discussing this publicly. I mean, we've seen enough like Freedom of Information Act response requests from like John Greenwald showing that Susan Gore, the Pentagon spokesperson. I don't think she's the spokesperson anymore, but she was at the time. You know, was explicitly saying like, you know, there are certain ways that we have to present the messaging of this to the press, to the public. So there's, you know, there's a hidden hand, but I also think that it's very clever, man. It's very clever because Congress and Senate, most of them, they don't know shit. Like, you know, they don't know. Like, they've only just really being introduced to this subject. So all these people, like, you know, like Burchett and like, you know, these people who were in the hearing and doing this, like, they've been briefed now. They've been given some idea, but they're not like, you know, they're not people who are pulling the strings of secrecy on this and have access to the portfolios. Like, that's way, way, way back, like somewhere in weird compartments and silos and stovepipes, right? And like obscure project managers and people like that. So like,
and probably people in the private sector who have
absolutely,
you know,
absolutely. So, you know, my point is that it's like an honest disclosure because the US Navy pilots saw these things and the Congress are now responding and that's all true and they want to develop an office, but it's like sidelining all of this like 80 years of clandestine classified study and secrecy and like, you know, what are they really hiding? How much do they really know? Why have we got people, and I'm not saying that like, you know, I'm not validating their credibility, but why do we have people like, for example, Sergeant Clifford Stone, who got up and said there were like 55 different cataloged species of ET? And then, you know, it's like there's so many different stories and claims. It'd just be really nice to get some clarity on like how specific the knowledge is, like how good is the information fidelity in some of these background compartments and silos. And that's not what the Congress and the Senate know. So it's like this weird kind of like, it is an honest disclosure because they're just being truthful with what they're trying to find out. But the actual kind of narrative of how much people know within the government, that's total bullshit. Like that's totally like, oh, we have no idea and our sensors have got pretty good now, so we're gonna try and study it. What an interesting thing. It turns out it's real. It's like, nah, man, like, come on, we cut it. No, you've definitely been saying for a long time.
Right. And it's just so hard to say how much progress has been made.
Exactly.
The Jacques Vallée view is like, you know, none of the classified stuff is special. The government has no idea what they're dealing with. Like that's the Jacques view.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the implications of the Grush view are that there's clearly, you know, people that know a lot more and have handled real material, and so it's just hard to suss out, and it's hard to know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. What would you say is your probability, like your sort of like likelihood that we have like crashed materials in our possession that we're actively sort of working on and trying to, you know, rebuild functional flying vehicles with?
I mean, I think it's really likely that we have something. Like, I don't know how we sourced it. Maybe archaeological. Like, I think there's a chance of an archaeological discovery as well, like an ancient technology being discovered. But I think it's possible. I think it's plausible. I think that there's enough historical, like modern historical testimony and anecdotal kind of reference to this stuff for me to feel like there's at least a layer of truth to the acquisition of these things. So I'm definitely not on the side of saying it's all bullshit, but I really want to see like genuine evidence for it. I really would love to see that. I don't know how realistic that is. If they have like a flying saucer of some form, like a disc, or you know, like any other alien vehicle.
You need to see a high def, intact, like kind of like pretty recreated like crap. You couldn't, because I've been to Gary Nolan's lab and like I've seen like decent you can't just be like these isotope ratios are different. Like I think for like broad disclosure to happen or really shift the consensus, I think you need to see like a craft flying.
You need
4K video of that or something.
I think a full blown like, here is a fucking alien spacecraft that we have. Like, here's a thing that you've never seen doing things you've never seen. Like, you know, and that would be, I think, a game changer on the world stage. I don't think they'll ever do that. I kind of get the sense that they'll subtly introduce some of the potential innovations, which may have already happened, by the way. I mean, we're going, you know, if you go from the whole Philip J. Corso hypothesis that things have been bled into global applications from the classified world. I mean, we know that's happened in conventional. It's happened. Exactly.
Of course, do you think that's legit, or
I don't know. I mean, I have it, like, funnily enough, I was actually meant to be going out to see Philip Corso Jr. In Florida, and we got sidelined at that time. But I would love to try and meet up with him again and have a discussion with him, because like it's interesting, and I don't know how much I believe, but he's a very high level guy. You know, Colonel Corso, his father, like the guy who wrote the book. He's a U.S. Air Force colonel. It was very bold statements made by him. So I don't know, man. Like it's hard to know. But his whole thing was that, like certain things like night optics and fiber optic cable and other stuff had kind of been developed or inspired in some way by reverse engineered technology.
I think this semiconductor thing is BS.
Semiconductors, yeah.
There were transistor patents from, I think, Germany in the 30s, as early as the 30s, and so I'm just not sure about that one. This is
the problem with the UFO subject. It's awash with narratives. It's awash with anecdotes and stories. Some of them contradict and conflict with each other, and you've got I always forget the name of it, but it like, oh god damn it, what is it? I can't remember. But anyway, it's quite famous, and it's like this operation, or like, it's called like Operation something. A Solar Warden. You heard of Solar Warden?
No, tell me about it.
Oh man, it's a whole other rabbit hole. Like, there's a few like, testimonies of like it's basically the secret space program, like vast fleets of, exotic vehicles being levied by humanity in secret, and it's a whole secret space fleet. And it's this is the thing with the UFO subject. It's perfect ground for really creative and just embellishment and stories. And it becomes completely impossible to start passing out, the real chunks of truth. And again, like we said at the beginning, I think that's by design, certainly from the 50s and the 60s, like the intelligence community interference in like UFO conferences and conventions. And they started putting, different narratives out there, and they certainly mixed the pot. And now what you're dealing with is like subculture under subculture under subculture within the fringe of ufology, where it's like, no, it's demons. No, it's like, the archons. No, it's the ascended masters of the Arcturian planes. No. And it's like, dude, like, this is kind of schizophrenic, and there's no way of really understanding the true kernels of reality to it. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd like to believe that crash retrievals and programs like that exist. It seems like a conventional and understandable thread of the story of the whole lore behind it. But I need better information. Yeah, I'd like to have better information.
I think it's to think about it differently for a UFO skeptic or somebody who's not super interested. It's good training ground for what just reality is turning into, which is sort of this new dark ages where all facts are relativized. We're drinking from a fire hose of conflicting facts. And so like the UFO thing is like a good example of like a field where now it's just full of so much bullshit, and you have to like almost like pan for gold or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
And really trust your internal barometer and like what sort of like, if something trips up your BS detector,
and be willing to change your opinion, because my opinion on the UFO subject has shifted and transitioned over the years. Like you like putting yourself into a rigid belief system with the UFO subject, I think is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's good sort of mental gymnastics. Like you're not pre-crystallizing knowledge. And some of the UFO people that that cover the subject are like, they're just so like evangelize. They're like, we have.
Oh my God, yes.
Like, well, you haven't seen the thing, so why are you saying that? What?
It's an intense scene. Before we wrap up, by the way, this has been really good, dude. Like a really good conversation.
I asked my.
Oh, you're welcome. But I asked, how much time you got left? Because I asked my Patreons if they had some questions for you.
Hit me with them. I have till, I guess, like probably like 15, 20 minutes, if that works.
Yeah, like we'll see how many of these we can get through then. Cool. So hang on a sec, let me just get them up on the screen. Yeah, but I've got my Patreons, I've got like a Discord, like a private Discord server, and so I just popped in there and said if anyone has some questions for you. First one is from Mike Hotel. He says, if Jesse had one free question for David Grush where NDAs did not apply, what would he ask him and why?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know, right? That's an interesting one.
It would be like a two-part. It would be like, who are these alien factions and what are their agenda? So it would like slam those together. It's like, who like literally like, who are they? And then what are their intention? If you had to press their objectives for humanity to the best of the U.S. government's abilities to deduce what they want with us, how would you describe that? And I don't know if he has that information, but that.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, has he hinted that he knows that kind of information in any way, or like?
No, he's pretty good about.
He is pretty good at shutting up when he needs to shut up. I've noticed that. I mean, he's an intelligence guy, man. It's 101. They know when to zip their mouth. All right, so that's a good series of questions. I think that's the kind of questions a lot of people would ask. Next one comes from ULC. What are your top 5 books of all time?
Oh, cool. Top 5 books of all time. I'm going to just throw this in there because it's so top of mind because we just did the show. I'll throw 2 in there from the show because I think they just were so helpful in the research. And one is a guy who's been on your show. Uh-huh. I think you connected me with, actually, is Nick Cook.
He's coming on soon with Ross.
So yeah, I saw that. Also, I'm pumped for that episode. That book, The Hunt for Zero Points, just so hard-headed and good and
brilliant.
Not not evangelizing or dogmatic. He kind of shakes out like, I don't really know, but it's very kind of fact driven. And so I would say that and that book was really helpful for researching the documentary. And then the other one is this guy named Paul Shotskin, who's this like, I think he's written 2 books in his life, and both clearly are so deeply researched. And I think he really has not gained much acclaim for either of them. One is a biography of Philo T. Farnsworth, who's the inventor of the TV.
Oh, cool.
And then the second is the Townsend Brown biography, the Man Who Mastered Gravity. And it's beautiful, and it goes into his life and his family life, but also, his inventions and his ideas and all of the bizarre relationships that clearly tie into the UFO story. And it's so well researched. I actually have like a 600-page I think him cutting it down version of it.
Nice.
And it's just amazing, like the amount of research this guy did. So yeah, go and buy his book, Paul Shotskin. And then, I don't know, Crime and Punishment, The Three Musketeers. I love Dumas. And a 5th book, I don't know, C.S. Lewis came to mind that made me
nice.
Screwtape Letters.
Love a bit of C.S. Lewis, some good recommendations. Unruly One has an interesting question. Jesse had a great American Alchemy program on remote viewing with Paul Smith and Herb Mertz, who was associated with the Pear Lab in Princeton. In the episode with Hal Puthoff, we all saw Eric Weinstein's reactions to the possibility of remote viewing, but researchers committing fraud or experiencing some mundane coincidences kind of like seem to put him off a bit. And he's wondering, does Weinstein take seriously after kind of you pulling him into the UFO field? How's he feeling about remote viewing? Is he there yet, or is he still tentative in the water?
I'll give a political answer, not because I'm not because of me, but I'll let him answer that. But I think he's still pretty skeptical. I mean, look, I think everybody has to discard their own epistemology to like totally write off the parapsychology thing. I think the issue with it is it has repeatability problems, and it has scaling it up is very hard.
Yeah.
And so it's this like super weak effect. I would say it's a weak effect because we live in the age of disenchantment, and this soup, the water that we are operating in, is one of a priori skepticism.
Absolutely.
Psychology can never really be proven within the scientific framework because it requires a priori skepticism. So if a James Randi or a Michael Shermer shows up to a random event generator experiment, they will skew the experiment in the wrong direction. There's this global consciousness project that came out of the Princeton Parapsychology Lab, and it was like these spikes in the random event generator Z-scores all around 9/11, these big events, and it's like, oh, this is crazy result. And then you realize there were these spikes that were like just as proportionately insane as the 9/11 spikes or whatever, when Bob John, who was head of the Pear Lab, died. So clearly there's an experimenter effect going on where like nobody in the average world knows who Bob John, this random plasma physicist who's founded Pear Lab, is. But it was getting the same effects. And so I think if you're skeptical and you go into an experiment like that, you affect the experiment. And so you end up in this tautological loop where if you're skeptical going in, you're gonna be skeptical coming out. And then if you believe going in, you're gonna believe more coming out. And so I would say belief is prior to the material world, and belief is prior to the results you get. And then I'm going to be written off as insane for saying that. And so it's really like this sort of fracturing of like underlying epistemological belief structures that we might end up seeing if parapsychology ever ends up gaining any sort of, headway.
Well said, man. David Nuns, I don't know how to pronounce your name, brother. Is it David Nunez or Nuns? Let me know next time we're having a talk in Discord, please. David Nuns wants to know if you have more context for the statements made by David Grush during Yes Theory's public Q&A session, where David spoke about timelines and sounded confident in what he said. It led some of us to believe that his informed opinion or belief is that in February of 2024, a presidential panel should be formed to investigate the issue of retrieval and reverse engineering programs dealing with this non-human tech. Does Jesse have any more context from David, perhaps off camera, about what the next steps are for disclosure?
I don't, but I think that's the hope. Like, his whole goal, I think people should realize this, is not for him to disclose. It's to make
get the system to respond.
Totally. And so like he's doing that in the most strategic way possible. And then I've heard rumors of a panel which would be like this cool kind of interdisciplinary panel with you'd have physicists and statesmen. Very interesting group of people that could look at reports and hopefully we make some progress there. I'm always skeptical of a lot of these sort of research organizations because
for sure.
But and honestly, not because I'm cynical about incentives, but because it's really important. And I think hopefully whoever's forming this panel is aware of this. But it's really important that people who are in it are open-minded.
Yeah.
It's like the Condon Committee, like Jalen Hynek was denied, he was denied access. Like he couldn't be on the Condon Committee. And it was like right when he started to become more open-minded. At least that's the superficial story. And I just hope you get people who are rigorous, but also open-minded.
Yeah. I agree. Last one. This comes from a known figure in the community, John Ramirez, retired GS-50 CIA officer, who also wants to
clear. Is he asking me a question? I should be asking him questions.
He's bouncing around in my Discord, and he wanted to ask you. Well, he actually wanted to clear something up. So I'll read what the message was that he sent to me. He said, I mentioned at my Phoenix MUFON presentation, Jesse Michaels' talk with David Grush. I want to let him know that I apologize for misidentifying him as MUFON investigator Jesse Peak. What struck a loud chord was Jesse's correlation of the early craft recoveries with the wartime Manhattan Engineering District and the post-war Atomic Energy Commission. Could he further elaborate on how he came to make that correlation? And he also just quickly said, let him know that I'm not challenging that assertion, but rather I'm intrigued by how close he came to a core secret. He did not hit the bullseye, but his dart hit the double ring. So could you further elaborate on how you came to the correlations with the Atomic Energy Commission, the Energy District, Manhattan Project?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was literally like a bunch of disparate sprinkles of information. So like, it's so funny, man. I'm so glad Amar Kandil from Yes Theory asked David Grush on the hike, which I don't even know if we were going to do the hike. Like I did this long sit down thing with him. And then the big through line and spine of the interview became around the atomic secrecy overlaying UFO secrecy. Right. But it really largely came from Amar saying to Dave, if you have a conversation with anybody in history, who would you have a conversation with? And Dave goes, I would have a conversation with Oppenheimer and, Robert Sarbacher, the people that stood this thing up. And then he goes into the McMahon Secrecy Act of 46, the original atomic secrecy, and then obviously the Atomic Energy Act of 53, 54. And so I'm hearing this from Dave. Meanwhile, I had just read The Man Who Mastered Gravity, and you had Townsend Brown meeting with Curtis LeMay, with, Edward Teller, with guys who were definitely clued into, some top atomic stuff. And then I remember distinctly, Jacques Vallée had always been on this sort of DOE atomic connection. I remembered from my interview with him that he mentioned that. He was like, actually, you'd have this separate set of clearances. If you ever had a crash, it would end up in the hands of, people around where the crash was, which were, people on the Manhattan Project. And then Dave says, that actually Blue Book was the original Manhattan Project. And it was like the weaving together of all of these things. And then if you think about it as well, maybe MJ12 is bullshit and it's like John Lear and Bill Moore like push this, document that like is pure fabrication. But if we did have UFO crashes in the late 40s, who would the government get on the top? That's the most important thing that's happening scientifically at that time. You probably would recruit Oppenheimer and Sarbacher and, you know, all these guys. Like, it makes sense, right? So yeah, that's how I kind of wove it together. And then, yeah, I hope for my own, you know, safety's sake that I don't know the real core secret. So you can, you know, take the bullseye, and I don't want to know.
I don't want this bullseye. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. I hear you, bro. It's like it's fun to tell a story, but you don't want to push too close to the mark on some of these things, you know. But hey, it just shows that you did a good job, good investigatory work. You know, John Ramirez has always been a reliable guy for me in terms of, like, you know, what he kind of gets told and how he knows a lot of the people involved in the process in DC. So yeah, I think he's giving you a pat on the back for getting close to the mark, and that's no bad thing. But Jesse, mate, this has been great. You know, I would encourage people to check out your channel, American Alchemy. Awesome channel. You've done an incredible documentary, 2 million views already, and no doubt clocking up. So give yourself a pat on the back, and thanks for spending 2.5 hours with me. This has been really cool.
It's been a blast. I appreciate it, Jay. And yeah, I would love to do it again. And yeah, man, I'm a big fan of your show too. So keep doing what you're doing. And yeah.